Welcome everybody to video number 5 of the Comancheria tutorial. We're going to pick up right where we left off from video number 4. Video 4 we went through the operation cleanup phase, that whole process. We spent a lot of time on that, and because it's a process that you're going to go through turn after turn after turn, and it may look like it's somewhat intimidating. How do you remember all of this? We tried to make the play aids as useful as possible to the player to help with that. But experience has told me that once I played through a process a few times, I haven't needed to really consult those play aids nearly as often. And you may have noticed already that basically the step-by-step style in the rules writing here, it's basically another way to present what could have been done on a flowchart. But some people find flowcharts to be intimidating, even confusing. In the graphic attempt to make something simple, sometimes we make it more complex and intimidating. So the step-by-step style of writing is something I decided to use in this game instead of flowcharts, and basically we can achieve the same goal. So let's go ahead and walk through the planning operation. Your reading assignment at the end of last video was to read section 4.3 of the rule book, and we're just going to go ahead and start walking through that. First of all, in step 1 of the planning operation, we look at our Mahimianas in play. Right now we only have one, so we only consult him. But since there's at least one success marker in his success boxes here on his medicine track, he increases his medicine from 2 to 3. And then we go to step 2 of planning, which is the shakedown dance. It's perhaps a crude way to present a cultural concept that the Comanche adhered to. And that concept was that your prestige in the tribe was generally enhanced by your generosity. So after a raid, the person who was most generous with the spoils of that raid would elevate his prestige within the tribe. So whoever gave the most ended up receiving the most prestige in the tribe, the highest standing. So, and that's really an interesting cultural concept worth actually considering. So here we go. What we're going to do in step 2 is we take one of the success markers out of our Mahimiana's success box and we give it to our Paraibo. And that's all we're going to do right there. We're just going to transfer one from the Mahimiana to the Paraibo. Then, since there's at least one success counter on the Mahimiana's track, we increase his medicine rating by +1. So he goes from 3 to 4, and then we take a success marker from him after we do that, and we put it into the operations track, and I probably should have zoomed out to do this. But we go ahead and we transfer him to any space on the operations track, and we have to put it into a space on the operations track that has the fewest success counters on it already. Since there's none in here yet, we're going to go ahead and put him right here, immediately below the operations counter, and why we do that will become evident as we move a little bit further. So we'll go ahead and put it into that space. The next time we have to put one on here, it would have to go down here into the 3 box, or up here in the start, or here even, but we couldn't put a second success marker into this space on this track. It's rare. I will tell you right now, it is rare to place more than one success marker onto this track. So come back over here, and we've completed step 2, but there is still one more success marker here on our Mahimiana's success track rate, or his medicine track here. So what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the steps. So we're going to transfer that last success marker here to our Paraibo. So step 2 of planning gets repeated. Step 2 got done the first time by taking one of the success markers out of here, bringing it down to him, and then since he still had markers remaining, we took one of his and put it over on the operations track, and we elevated his medicine rating by 1 more. So our medicine rating of our Mahimianas increased by 2 in this process. And then, since there was still success markers remaining here, we repeated step 2, and the first part of step 2 is to take one success marker from our Mahimiana and give it to our Paraibo. Now there are no more markers up here, so our Mahimiana will not go up again, and a second marker will not end up over here on the operations track. We would have needed a 4th success marker there to do that. And again, that is an unusual a rare occurrence, if you will, for that to happen with one particular Rancheria. So here we go. And we finished up step 2. And so we move on to step 3 now. We're at the top left-hand column of page 10 in the rule book if you're liking to follow along. In this step, we're going to increase the medicine of any of our Paribos who has success counters in his medicine track. And in our case, we only have one Rancheria in play again, so it's only going to apply to this guy. But again, we would have done these steps with any and all of our Rancherias in play if they had success markers in their tracks. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take these 2 success markers, and for every success marker that's in his track, the Paribo's medicine goes up by 1. So he increases medicine from 2 to 4, and then these markers do not go to the operations track. Instead, they go to out of play, where they will remain until we either take a Headman action to put it back in the draw cup, or until we do a passage of time operation, which effectively resets the draw cup. Step 4, planning. This step gets a little more interesting when we have more Rancherias in play. And that's where planning becomes very, very powerful, is when you have multiple Rancherias with Paribos in play. This is where our Paribos get to do their thing. So right now we only have one Rancheria in play, and so only one Paribo gets to conduct a Headman action. So what we can do here is one of 2 things. It's kind of a press your luck sort of mechanic in the game. What I can do is I can choose to execute one Headman action with this guy, and one only, and be done with it. And we would then move on to step 5 of planning. Or I can roll a die, and if I roll less than or equal to his medicine rating, then whatever roll I rolled on the dice, that's how many Headman actions he gets to take. So he could take up to 4 if I were to roll a 4. But if I were to roll a 5 or 6, which is higher than his medicine rating, I would get to do no Headman action. So for the purposes of this demo, I really like my odds, so I would roll the dice. And in the demo, we just said that in the tutorial, let's just say we rolled a 3, which is a good result. Just for grins, I'm going to roll the dice in Vassal, and it would have been a 2. Another option, 1. I hate it when I press my luck and I'm going to roll a 1. Obviously, if I had trade goods, I can use those for re-rolls. So those are some things to consider too. For the purposes of our demo here, our tutorial, let's just say that we rolled the dice and we got 3 as a result, which means we get to take 3 Headman actions with our Paribo. So for Headman action number 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 1 AP that we already have here on our track. I'm going to spend 1 AP, and what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go ahead and take the Ute Alliance card. That is a development card that's in play. It's one of the 3 cards in play at the top of our screen here. And I'm going to go ahead and take that from the top of the map, and I'm going to transfer it to my hand. And you'll see on the card text, it says spend 1 AP to take into hand. That can only happen during planning. Okay, that's the only time you can spend that 1 AP to take that card into hand. So we go ahead and do that, but now we have no action points. Basically, what I'm going to do with this card is I'm going to hold on to it. It's my rainy day card because it gives me a 66% chance of just outright killing one of these tribes, and that's a big deal for my victory goal. Something I want to say about this, there is no limit to how many cards I can hold in hand. And development cards are the only cards I hold in hand. Culture cards are considered in play, and they're never considered part of my hand, per se. That's an important distinction because there are, in every period of the game, there is one card in every historic period that is called Missed Opportunity. And when it is drawn, what it does is it causes you to discard all of your held cards from your hand. That's not going to affect your culture cards, but it will affect any of these cards that I've been holding onto. There's no limit to how many cards I can hold on to, but again, hold on to them at your own risks because, you're likely to at some point lose them. So use them before you lose them is, I guess, the moral of the story. So we go ahead and we adjusted our APs from 1 to 0, so we have no action points left. But we still got 2 Headman actions. So what we'll do for action number 2 is we're going to acquire 1 action point back. Now to do that, I have to reduce my Paraibo's medicine rating by 1, and we increase action points by 1. So basically, he is using his political capital to develop long-term down-the-road plans. That is what this is attempting to represent. So we reduced our Paraibo's medicine rating from 4 to 3. We got 1 AP. For Headman action number 3, we're going to acquire 1 more action point. By having 2 action points, it gives us a little more flexibility. So we're going to go ahead and reduce his medicine rating back down to 2. So he's spent all of his political capital that he gained as a result of his leadership and the generosity of his young warriors. But he has assembled 2 action points, and that gives us a lot of flexibility because now we could reactivate some of our 2-strength bands. All right, so our Paraibo's medicine rating has been reduced. We've gotten our 2nd AP, but we're done with our Headman actions. Step 5 of planning does not apply to us right now. You can see the design note in the rulebook for an explanation of what's going on there. Basically, there's only a couple situations where you could be in a planning phase and have a Mahimiana with a medicine rating of 0, which means he's dead. So during planning, you would be able to get that Mahimiana back. Effectively, a new leader arises, and he's going to have a medicine rating of 1, 2, or 3. Excuse me, he's going to have a medicine, 1, 2, or 3. Because you roll a die, you have the result, but a minimum result of 1. You can never be alive and have a medicine rating less than 1. So we're going to skip step 5. That doesn't apply right now. Step 6 of planning, we're forced to reduce the strength of all of our bands that are currently on their finished side. So we remove both of our finished bands from Rancheria A's resources box to out of play, and then we'll replace them with 1-strength bands. So we'll throw both of them back into here, and I just use the automated feature to do that, and then we reacquire 1-strength bands in their place. So basically they went down 1 level in strength, but they are more mobile and they are on their unfinished sides. So we go ahead and put them into the resources box. This is the big cost of planning. And in Navajo Wars, death of personnel, death of population happened during passage of time. And so that was the thing you always tried to avoid doing, if at all possible, because it tended to invoke bad things upon you. In this game, planning is going to reduce your population in some way. It's going to do that unless all of your bands are in an unfinished state, and that is going to be a rare thing unless you did planning again. When everybody was unfinished. Sometimes that makes sense to do that, but that is the big trade-off. Planning is a very powerful operation in the game, and the trade-off is that is when I have chosen to model the timeline attrition of the people. So as time goes on, people age, my warriors end up dying off. There's other causes of death besides warfare, accidents in hunting, etc. How I build these guys back up is going to happen during passage of time. So during passage of time, my bands get stronger. I can get more bands. I can develop new rancherias. But during planning is when attrition takes place. So now we come to step 7 of planning. And this step is the primary way that a player is going to be able to move his in-play rancheria counters on the map. Since we have a total of 4 strength points here in Rancheria A, you see we have 2, 3, 4, we can move our Rancheria counter, the hexagonal counter, up to 4 spaces. We can move up to 4 spaces. We can move along dash lines or solid lines. Remember, the color of the line and the shape of the line has nothing to do with player movement. It only impacts how the enemy moves. So we can move up to 4 spaces. We can move along any of the line connections, but because we cannot enter an enemy space, and remember how that is defined in the glossary, section 2.1 of the rulebook, I believe is your glossary, or maybe it's 1.2. I don't have the rules in front of me, but it's one of those. It's a good rule to read. It's a couple pages, but that's your glossary. Read what it says about enemy spaces. Square spaces are always enemy spaces. spaces that contain a tribe or a settlement are considered enemy spaces. And so right now our Rancheria is pretty much boxed in. So he's really not able to move a whole lot. The only space Rancheria A can move to, and movement is optional in this step. I don't have to move him. But the only space I can move him right now is to Upper Arkansas number 2. The square enemy space connected by a dashed line to Upper Arkansas number 1 is an enemy space, as are the 2 spaces with the tribe counters. So we're kind of, like I said, boxed in. Now, let me just give you a hypothetical, as we did this in the printed tutorial. Let's assume for a second that there was peace in the west, and this was a peace space. Peace space trumps enemy space status. So if this were the case, I could move 1, 2, 3 to here, or I could move 1. I couldn't move into there. So basically I could move 1, 2, 3 and stop, or I could move him to here and stop. There's a number of things I could do there. If there was no tribe here, I could move 1, 2, 3, 4, get him into Paladero Canyon. There's a number of things I could do if I wasn't quite so boxed in. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the options available to the player. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to go ahead and move Rancheria from Upper Arkansas 1 to Upper Arkansas 2. That just puts us closer to our enemies. It makes it easier to raid, just raid the heck out of these guys. Recall that Apache War is in place, so if we get that 3rd Ravage counter on a tribe, it kills it. We need to get rid of these 2 guys for our victory goal, and the quicker we can do that, the better off that will be as a player in the game. So we'll go ahead and stop there. I think that's a good spot to stop. I'm going to have to ask you to pause the video. I want to finish planning in this video, but I'm going to ask you to pause right here and read section 6.22b in the rulebook. That's 622 Bravo in the rulebook before we continue. Okay, so in section 6.22b, there is another way that enemy instructions can be executed that is independent of action point expenditure. So we have already seen how the enemy can spend APs from both the track and from the available box down here. But during planning, during step 8 of planning, the enemy gets to execute a free instruction. And so while we're in step 8 of planning, we undertake the procedure in 622b. So again, we are in a nested procedure. Step 1 of 622b is very similar to what we did during the Operation Cleanup phase. We have to first roll a die to identify which enemy is going to act against us. And for the purposes of this tutorial demo, we're going to say that we roll a 6. And so what that's going to do is that's going to activate the South. So the South is our active enemy here. So next we roll on the enemy instruction display to see which instruction counter on the South's column will flip over. And we'll say that we rolled a 2, which will flip the Subjugate 4 marker over from its Subjugate 4 side to its War 3 side. So that's the step 2. Now we go to step 3 of 622b, and we execute the topmost instruction of the enemy's column for free. This costs no APs, even though there are 3 APs here on the track. This is a freebie. It costs the enemy nothing. So we slide this guy over, and we execute a settle instruction. So again, I'm going to give you just a real quick reading assignment. I'm just going to pause the video here real briefly and read section 638 in the rulebook before continuing. Okay, so in step 1 of the settle procedure, so now we're 3 levels in on procedures. We are in the middle of planning. Okay, we are in step 8 of planning, and we're in step 3 of 622b, and now we're in step 1 of a settle procedure. So I guess this is where it could maybe really confuse a player, like, where am I? We're in a procedure within a procedure within a procedure, and this is again why I chose not to do flow charts. This could get real messy. But once you do this a few times, you'll see that it is really an easy thing to follow. During step 1 of the settle procedure, we look to see if there's any ravage counters belonging to the west, the green enemy, and we don't see any. There aren't any in place, so we don't have to worry about that. And so we just kind of move along. We can't place the settlement. We're going to basically place a settlement counter belonging to the west. We can't place them into here because it's an enemy-occupied space. It would violate stacking. Basically, what we need to do is put this settlement into the space nearest the square enemy space in the south. Zoom in here so we can see this real well. We need to place it into a round map space nearest to this square enemy space that is connected by the green lines and does not violate stacking. Right now, this is one space away, but stacking would be violated. This is 2 spaces away, 1, 2, but it would violate stacking. We are not allowed to use the dashed line connections. It's dashed line and it's not even green, so we can't go that direction. We have to go through here. Now this does not block movement past him, so I could see, is this space eligible? Yes, it is. It's 2 spaces away. It's occupied only by bison, and it does not violate stacking. So we could put him there, but this space is also 2 spaces away from the square space in the west and would also be a legal placement. What we're going to do now to break the tie is we look at the area value of the 2 contending spaces. And you'll see here that Rio Grande number 4 has a value of 4, and the Brazos, Colorado space has a value of 6. We place them into the lowest numbered space. And so basically what's going to win is area number 4 of Rio Grande. And part of the placement is the bison gets removed to the out of play box, or the resources box rather. So he gets stuck down there. And now the south, Spaniards out of Mexico have expanded and are starting to move north now. So that resolves the instruction. Now we go ahead and we go back to our 622B procedure. And in step 4, we reset the enemy instruction display. So everything slides up and he comes around down here, and that will complete that. Now we come to step 9 of planning. We're back to the planning procedure. The operations counter is now we look at that. Where is it? It's not in a numbered space, so we don't make a die roll. We simply advance it down to the next space into this track, and that will conclude the planning operation. So in our, I was going to say in our next video, we'll go through the cleanup phase, but why don't we just go ahead and do that really quick. That will just kind of tidy things up for the next video segment. We'll go back into an operation cleanup phase. There's no stacking violations anywhere on the map, so we don't have to worry about that. And nor are there any resource counters on the operations track. I should point out why that exists in the rulebook. That actually exists in the rulebook because of this card. Horsemanship level 2 allows you to take an action called husbandry, and you place horse counters onto the operations track and so basically it's during step 1 of the operation cleanup phase that you would go ahead and collect those and put them into a rancheria and so forth. So that's what's going on there. Now there is a success counter on the operations track in the same space as the operations counter, and so that goes into the draw cup. And that's why we placed that marker in the space immediately below our operations, because I knew this marker was going to come down here and then it would go into the draw cup, and that just expedited the process. Had I placed that marker in another space, I would have to wait until either passage of time or until the operations counter entered that space. That's why I went ahead and did that. All right, there's no finished bands in our Rancheria. All of our bands are in an unfinished state, so we basically skipped step 2. Step 3 of the operation cleanup phase, we draw a counter, from the success draw cup. And for the purposes of the demo, let's just say I draw out a success counter. Thankfully, the enemy does not get any additional action points to spend against us, but since there are enemy APs saved on the general record track here, we still have to work through the 622A procedure. The enemy is going to get a chance to act here. So we're going to determine, first of all, which of the enemy acts, and our die roll is a 2, which means the north will activate. So we go ahead and then the north is going to activate. Next die roll is going to be a 6, which flips the instruction here at the bottom from its hunt 2 side to its encroachment 5 side. So encroach is basically how tribe markers get placed back into these areas. So that's something that we get to look forward to down the road here ways. I should point out something. I don't think I mentioned this in the tutorial, but there comes a point at which you will need to stop killing tribes. It's important to our victory goals early on to make space and to control certain territories, but tribes are an important buffer against the colonial enemy. On the one hand, they are also a valuable trading partner. When they do raid us, their raids tend to be weak. Not always, but they tend to be weak, and you can usually defeat them without a whole lot of difficulty. And there comes a point at which I will need to slow down the rate at which I'm killing off other tribes, and I need to turn my focus toward the colonial enemy. So that's just something to think about. There's some strategic thinking that you'll want to consider as you begin to move from learning the game to learning how to play the game well. All right, so we've decided which enemy's activating. We've flipped over random counter. Now in step 3 of the 622A procedure, the enemy spends its APs. The topmost north instruction is a raid with a cost of 2. So this is going to get resolved. So they're going to execute a raid, and they will spend 2 of the 3 available enemy APs. And so we're going to have you stop here real quick. And I'd like you to pause just briefly and read section 6.3.6 and 6.3.7 in the rule book before we continue. Okay, so in 6.3.6 and 6.3.7 of the rule book, obviously I'm jumping ahead of myself. I forgot something. This is late at night when I'm shooting this video, and I'm just going to do this live. I mean, I could just reshoot this, but let me just be legit with you and say I forgot. I have a ravage counter up here, duh. And the tutorial also points that out. There is a ravage counter in the space belonging to the active enemy. Step 2 of the raid procedure causes us to terminate that procedure and instead conduct a recover instruction. Recovery is automatic unless an in-play card says otherwise. Remember, card text trumps the rules. And so in our case, the history card in play says that we have to make a die roll. So you'll see down here it says recover instructions only succeed on a die roll of 1 to 3. If the roll is 4 to 6, the APs are spent, but no ravage counter is removed. So let's say that our die roll actually is a 3 here, and again, we don't have trade goods for a reroll. So the effect is that this instruction does get resolved. It's done. We did a recover action instead of the printed raid action, but we're going to go ahead and delete the ravage counter. So we're kind of back to square one in terms of killing off these 2 tribes here. So that's all we can do there. There's only 1 enemy AP available, and the topmost instruction is ally with a cost of 3. So basically that's going to terminate the 622A procedure. And we'll go ahead and do this. All right, ravage counter just goes back to our available stock, and we are all done. Step 4 of the operation cleanup phase, as we saw earlier in the tutorial, it does not apply yet. There's no war columns in play here, and so we can go ahead and just skip straight forward to the next operation selection phase. And we're going to work through that in our next video, video number 6. It might be another couple days before I get a chance to do that. I hope these videos are helping you to learn the game. Again, everything you need is in the playbook to teach you the game, but some people are visual learners, and maybe the videos are of assistance, and there are opportunities, I think, where I can drop some strategic hints to new players. So hopefully the videos are of value to you. I will continue to do them until we get through the tutorial. Just going to have to be patient with me as I find the available time to make these and upload them. All right, I'm Joe Toppin. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in video number 6.